Daf Yomi Tractate Zevachim, page 43. Daf Mem Gimel. Starting from the bottom of Ben Beis Med Beis, the new Mishnah, last line of 42b. The Mishnah says, Ve'elu devarim she'en chayav v'mishum pigul ha'koimetz v'gatoyos v'lo'ena. And these are the items for which one is not liable to receive karet due to violation of the prohibition of pigul. One is liable to receive karet only if he partakes of an item that was permitted for consumption or for the altar by another item. As for the items listed here, either nothing else renders them permitted for consumption or for the altar, or they themselves render other items permitted. They are as follows. The handful of flour which permits consumption of the meal offering, the incense which is burned in its entirety without another item rendering it permitted for the altar, the frankincense which is burned together with the handful of the meal offering. Now we turn to 43a, top of the page, which is our daf of the day, with the words uminchat kohanim. Uminchat kohanim, uminchat kohen Mashiach, ve'adam v'nesachim, haboyin mipnei atzmon divrei me'er, ha'momrim, ahaboyin v'hema. The meal offering of priests, from which no handful of flour is removed, and which is burned in its entirety, see Leviticus 6:16. The meal offering of the anointed priest, which is sacrificed by the high priest each day, half in the morning and half in the evening, the blood which permits all the offerings and the libations that are brought by themselves as a separate offering, and do not accompany an animal offering. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say the same halacha applies even with regard to libations that are brought with an animal offering. Log shemen shemitzayre, Rabbi Shimon Omer, ein chayav olav mishum pigul, Rabbi Meir Omer, chayavin olav mishum pigul, shedam ha'asham matiro, v'chol sheyesh lo matirin, bein l'adam, bein l'mizbeach, chayavin olav mishum pigul. With regard to the log of oil that accompanies the guilt offering of a recovered leper, Rabbi Shimon says one is not liable for consuming it due to violation of the prohibition of pigul because it is not permitted by any other item. And Rabbi Meir says one is liable for consuming it due to violation of the prohibition of pigul as the blood of the guilt offering of the leper permits its use, as only after the blood sacrifice is the oil sprinkled and given to the priests. And the principle is with regard to any item that has permitting factors, either for consumption by a person or for burning on the altar, one is liable for eating it due to violation of the prohibition of pigul. Ha'ola dama matiras besara למזבח ואוירה לכהנים, אוי לעשור תמתי את בשרו למזבח, חטא שרוף תמתיר את בשרו לכהנים, פורים הנשרפים וסירים הנשרפים תמתיר. איזה מויר לקרב. The Mishnah elaborates, the burnt offering, its blood permits its flesh to be burned on the altar and its hide to be used by the priests. The burnt offering, its blood permits its flesh and its skin to be burned on the altar. The burnt sin offering, its blood permits its meat for consumption by the priests. Bulls that are burned, for example, the bull for an unwitting communal sin, and goats that are burned, for example, the goats sacrificed for an unwitting communal sin of idol worship, their blood permits their sacrificial portions to be sacrificed on the altar. Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol she'en al mizbeach achiton k'shlamim, ein chayavin olav mishum pigul. Rabbi Shimon says, those bulls and goats are not subject to pigul because their blood is presented in the sanctuary. And in the case of any offering whose blood is not represented on the external altar, like that of a peace offering, with regard to which halacha was stated in Tahileh, one is not liable for eating it due to violation of the prohibition of pigul. That's the Mishnah, and now we start the Talmud. Now we start the Talmud. Amar Ula. Ula says, Kometz pigul she'elo al gabim hamizbeach, peka pigulo mimenu. Im acherem מביא לידי פיגול, הוא עד פה לכל שכן, מה כלומר, הכי כלומר? אם אינו מתקבל מביא אחרים לידי פיגול. Ula says, with regard to a handful of a meal offering that is pigul, that was offered up on the altar, its pigul status has left it. His reasoning is as follows. If this handful brings other items to a status of pigul, with regard to itself, it is not all the more so. The Gemara asks, what is Ula saying? This consideration is not explaining why the status of pigul should leave the handful. The Gemara answers that this is what he is saying. If the handful is not accepted, meaning if its sacrifice is disqualified, how can it bring other items to a status of pigul? A meal offering is considered pigul only if its handful is properly sacrificed. Kamash Malan. Id ein chayav ela mishum pigul tanina ela dvarim she'en chayav aleihem mishum pigul hakometz v'haketoires halevoida minchas kohanim uminchas kohen mashiach uminchas nisach im adam. The Gemara asks, what is Ula teaching us? If he is teaching us that one is not liable for eating the handful due to violation of the prohibition of pigul, we learn this in the Mishnah. These are the items for which one is not liable due to pigul: the handful, the incense, the frankincense, the meal offering of priests, the meal offering of the anointed priest, the meal offering brought with libations that accompany animal offerings, and the blood. If so, one is not liable for eating the handful, even if it was not offered up on the altar. Ela dimalu lo yodu tanina halan v'ayotzir tameh v'shenishchat chutz zmano v'chutz limikomo imalu lo yodu. Rather, Ula is teaching that if items with pigul status ascend to the altar, they shall not descend. But this too we learn in a Mishnah 84a with regard to sacrificial flesh that is left overnight, or that emerges from a temple courtyard, or that is ritually impure, or for an offering that was slaughtered with the intention of eating the meat beyond its designated time or outside its designated area, thereby acquiring the status of pigul. If any one of these ascend to the altar, they shall not descend. Eladim yalu ha nami tanina kishem she'im alu lo yerdu kach im yerdu lo alu lo tzricha shemashla behen ha'u. Rather, Ula is teaching that if items with pigul status ascended from the altar after having been brought up there, they ascend once again. But we also learn that in that same Mishnah, 84b, that this is not so. Just as if they ascended the altar, they shall not descend to, if they descended from the altar, they shall not ascend. The Gemara answers no. Ula's ruling is necessary in a case where the fire has already taken hold of it, meaning the handful began to burn before it came down from the altar. Ula teaches that in such a case, the priests should return the handful to the altar as its pigul status has already left it. The Gemara raises a difficulty with this halacha too. Ula already said it on another occasion. As Ula says, the Mishnah taught that items that descended from the altar shall not ascend again, only where the fire has not taken hold of them. But where the fire has already taken hold of them, they shall ascend. The Gemara explains, even so, there is a novelty in Ul's ruling, lest you say that this matter applies only, turn to 43b on top, to a limb of an offering, which is all connected together so that it forms a single unit, and one can say that if fire took hold of part of it, all of it is consecrated, is considered the food of the altar, and therefore is returned to the altar if it came down. But with regard to a handful, which consists of separate pieces, perhaps only the part that the fire took hold of is returned to the altar, but as for the rest, you might say that it does not descend again. Therefore, Ula teaches that the same halacha applies to the handful as to a limb. Meaning, if it descended from the altar after fire already took hold of any part of it, it ascends once again in its entirety to the altar.